So to start off our little story,
Yeah.
uh, don't mess with James Gunn.
No.
The man has a very Trumpian or Elon Muskian approach to Twitter.
Yeah. I would say probably more Elon than Trump, because Trump is
Mhm.
not a very eloquent
Yeah, that's
speaker
true.
or Twitterer or tweeter, and yeah. But yeah. So uh, a what den the Den of Nerds. Okay, I've never heard of this person before. Not a knock on him. I just you know
The name sounds a little familiar.
yeah. Yeah, yes, the man of the hour. Yeah, we're gonna talk about it, Dean Rhino. Um, but yeah, so he tweeted that uh, James Gunn doesn't like Henry Cavill, and then James Gunn said, "No, that's false," and like, "Oh, well, that's what I heard," and
With the
so
with that obnoxious praying emoji that I hate.
yeah, yeah. And then James Gunn came back and said, "Well, sorry that your mom kicked you out of her basement."
Well, it's even better than that. So basically, he came in and said, "Oh, so the guy said, so somebody else brought in, care to debunk this one? Sure, false. Even more people have reached out to me since you said this to tell me that you really don't like him. Just saying what I heard. Prayer emoji. I fucking hate that."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
To,
It's yeah.
to which James Gunn replies, "So weird. You seem so plugged in. Anyway, I just had 4 people reach out to me to say that you just got kicked out of your mom's basement. So sorry, man."
Oh, 911. I need to report a murder.
Yes. Like, this makes about as much sense as, like, hey, Daniel, I hear that you don't like Bogdan. And you say, what are you talking about? Bogdan's my artist. Well, that's just what I heard, man. I don't know.
uh, no. Wrong.
Yeah. Although, although, uh, now a few days ago, this was complete nonsense. About 5 days ago, it seems like it's like a minor eternity in DC shakeup news.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
maybe there was a little bit more to that than we thought, because
Yeah.
Henry Cavill says he is no longer returning as Superman.
Uh, yeah. That's yeah, and Dean Rhino saying he's going to cost DC billions. Yeah,
Possible.
that's possible. Yeah. I mean, if there was one bright spot with the DCEU, it was Henry Cavill as Superman. Now, I would say he looks like Superman, and he certainly, I think he can act like Superman, given the right script and the right director, the right material, which
He
unfortunately he really
never
didn't.
got.
Yeah, he never got that. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so I guess I'll go ahead and read this. I've just had a meeting with James Gunn and Peter Safran, and it's sad news, everyone. I will, after all, not be returning as Superman. After being told by the studio to announce my return back in October, prior to their hire, this news isn't the easiest, but that's life. Yeah, that's the thing. Like back in October, right around when Black Adam came out, he announced that he was coming back to play Superman, and because he had he had that cameo at the end of the movie,
Hmm.
and I think you were saying that uh, the reason that they put that in there, it's like
Well, yeah. Why? Someone asked on Twitter, why would you put Superman and Black Adam if you wasn't going to use him? To which I reply, to add another 10 million to the opening weekend.
yeah,
Now, the truth of it is probably at the time that they did that, the plan was to keep using him. This was before James Gunn got put in charge.
right, yeah, so. Yeah, that and which is it's kind of like having the rug pulled out from under you. It's
Hmm.
and so now it's the changing of the guard is something that happens. I respect that. James and Peter have a universe to build. I wish them and all involved with the new universe the best of luck and happiest of fortunes. For those who have been by my side through the years, we can mourn for a bit, but then we must remember Superman is still around. Everything he stands for still exists, and the examples he sets for us are still there. My turn to wear the cape has been passed, and but what Superman stands for never will. It's been a fun ride with you all, onwards and upwards. Yeah, one thing you can say about Henry Cavill, he's a class act.
Yep. We don't deserve Henry Cavill.
No, and it's really probably one of I hate to compare him to this, but it sort of reminds me of John Candy in his early in his career,
Hmm.
where like he would get into a movie, like he would do a movie, and everybody would say, "Oh, we really like John Candy, but that movie sucks." And it's kind of the same thing here. Like, well, we really like Henry Cavill, but everything he's been putting in, he just hasn't been very good.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like man. So I finally saw Man of Steel earlier this year. In my opinion, that's a miserable movie. But
Mm.
Henry was well cast.
Yeah.
Like he deserved better than he got.
Yeah. Yeah. And not just with Superman, also with The Witcher. Um, you
Yep.
know, he was wasted on that show. It wasn't really The Witcher. It was what's her name
Yennefer
show.
show.
Yeah, it was the Yennefer show. And but yeah, and and I hate to use a sports analogy here, but again, like I did last show, but this is a bit like when a team hires a new coach and a new GM, and they want to go through a rebuild with the team,
Hmm.
and they tell the star veteran player, "Hey, you're really great, you're really talented, you've done a lot for this team, but it's time for us to move on." And they cut him or they trade him or whatever. It's a bit like
Right.
this.
Because here's I've been really thinking about this. So my bias, I'm just going to be right up front.
Hmm.
I have never liked the Snyderverse. I enjoyed the first Suicide Squad movie on kind of a base, bright colors and snarky banter level.
Hmm.
I liked the Snyder cut well enough when I watched it, though since then I feel like I was mildly bamboozled just because it was something special.
Yeah.
Besides that, like I kind of got dragged to Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
It's and here's the problem, and I was really thinking about it. So, and you mentioned James Bond before.
Hmm.
So the problem is that if you have an actor who is associated with a role and and you have a new role coming up and you don't recast it,
Hmm.
or if you're trying to make a major change, like imagine if the first Casino Royale movie was starring what's his name from the '90s movies.
Brosnan.
Yeah, imagine if you said, okay, Mister, Peter, uh, you're really made to be James Bond. Maybe you're a little too old because we were doing Roger Moore in the '80s, and you were busy being Remington Steele on TV, which was kind of like the consolation
Yeah.
prize.
Yeah. Pierce Brosnan was his name.
Pierce Brosnan. Did I say Peter?
Peter.
Anyway,
You're close enough.
but but imagine if they said, you know what, you deserved better than the last three James Bond movies, the last two James Bond movies. We're doing a fresh start. We're bringing you in. We're bringing you back. You could still be James Bond in Casino Royale because we
Mhm.
think that you're an awesome guy.
Yeah.
Is the public who watched the last or didn't watch the last couple of James Bond movies and think that they're campy junk that's stupid, are they going to what assumptions are they going to come into on a new Pierce Brosnan uh, James Bond movie? They're going to assume it's more of the same.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. They're going to expect it to be campy and silly. Yeah.
Right. In fact, they'll probably go, "Oh, is that It's that James Bond I don't like.
Yeah.
Skip.
Mm-hmm.
Where like when you have a new version of a well-established and well-beloved character, you're going to at least get a few people who go, well, it's kind of like what made Star Wars The Force Awakens so big. It's like, oh, a new Star Wars. Let's give that a shot.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, I think that this is the right choice ultimately.
Mm.
Because if you had him and Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot around, everyone's going to assume it's just the same movies.
Mm.
And the problem was always the movies, not the cast. Like I told you
Yeah.
this the other day when we were chatting.
Yeah.
Uh, how I walked away from Wonder Woman 84 thinking, man, Gal Gadot is just miscast as Wonder Woman. And I said,
Yeah.
wait a minute. That's an insane thought that just went through your brain, DB, because you enjoyed her in at least two of her last three performances.
Yeah.
And she was not the problem with Batman v Superman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and D Rhino, I tend to agree with him. Man of Steel and Snyder Cut. Yeah, I enjoyed both. I will say I enjoyed Man of Steel at least up until like the last 20 minutes. I thought was a bit much.
It is the
Um,
closest we're going to get to a proper live action Dragon Ball Z fight.
that's true. Yeah. um, but yeah, I see where you're coming with it. Obviously they want to. Uh, I think James. I think moving on from Henry Cavill gives James Gunn and Peter Safran an excuse to just hard reboot this whole franchise. Not just recast Superman, but Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Aquaman, etc.
Right. And let's. So I think I mentioned that was here. So I'm having an old man moment. Did I mention this before or after the show that if an accountant just looked at it, there's obvious reasons why you would switch the Bobs. I think it
That was
was
before
before
the
the show.
show. It was before
Okay,
the show. Yeah,
so
yeah.
before the show, thank you for keeping me on track.
Yeah.
I was mentioning that as much as like if you watch Valiant Renegade and Cameron Pasha talk about uh, Bob Chapek's brilliant behind the scenes maneuvers to try to get Disney to heel and how he was at his moment of triumph,
Hmm.
an accountant would look at how Disney Plus and was being run and how the box office performance of the various Marvel movies and say, yeah, this guy's got to go.
Hmm.
By the same token, the public actually had an opportunity to vote on how much they cared about Henry Cavill coming back as Superman.
Hmm.
This movie's name was Black Adam.
Yeah, and this movie is going to end up probably losing about 100 million, 50 to 100. I think they projected it would lose about 100 to 50 to 100 million dollars.
Yep. So here's the thing. So this chart appears to show a net profit of 52 million to Black Adam. Here's the problem with that.
Hmm.
And this is something that a few people have pointed out. So, you have about 390 million worth of box office, which I think is a pretty reasonable final estimate for it to end up with
Yeah.
as it currently stands. Uh, Now, then they take down, how much do they make in domestic revenue or in movie revenue
Hmm.
for the different markets, and that basically tracks with our 50-ish% domestic, 40-ish% international. So
Right. Yeah.
that we usually use. Um, then you go, okay, so international home entertainment 27, domestic free TV 17. These aren't numbers they've made yet because the movie is still in theaters and has only just come to buy on digital.
Yeah.
You go, okay, well, you have this 86 million here from domestic home entertainment and streaming. And at first you think, okay, so they're making money off of streaming. And then you think to
Hmm.
yourself, wait a minute, where is Black Adam going to be streamed?
HBO Max.
So, Daniel, if HBO Max, uh, as a matter of accounting, has to pay the production studio who made it, 86, we'll say 86 million here,
Yeah.
and then and 86 million here, and then Warner Brothers proceeds to pocket that into that production company that made that made Black Adam. Has HBO Max actually made any money?
No.
No, it has not. Or I should say, has Warner Brothers made any money on the whole? I should say.
Yeah. No.
No. Like most streaming services, HBO Max is still an enormous money pit.
hmm
That's part of why Zaslav is in there making so many cuts. Like, well, how can you cut that? We're on fire.
Yeah.
Very few things actually justify their existence right now.
Yeah.
So if you take that out, um, and it looks like their estimate for global their production cost is actually higher than what we saw listed places, 195 million.
hmm
Global print and advertising, 100 million, which makes sense because we were talking about how people were saying that if you were watching House of the Dragon, you were seeing a lot of Black Adam ads apparently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then various residuals, global home entertainment costs, participations. So basically, the Rock's cut.
Right. Yeah.
If we take this 86 million out and we go, this isn't money you've made yet.
Yeah.
Right now, it's still a gaping money pit,
Yes.
like we've been saying for weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. As much as much as a lot of people and us included wanted this movie to be successful, it just wasn't.
Right. And I did partially want this movie to be successful just because of Black Eye to Disney.
hmm
But you'll notice that its total revenues, actually, that's not a fair comparison. Its global box office, though, is behind the domestic box office for Black Panther. And Black Panther is making about 60% of what the first movie made.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, and again, with I think the fatal flaw with this movie was that it's you're making a movie about a Shazam villain that you've turned into an anti-hero.
Who was not even introduced in the prior Shazam movie, which in that Shazam movie wasn't all that successful ultimately.
Right. Yeah.
It was a fine movie,
hmm
but
Yeah. Yeah. It was all right. Yeah. Um.
yeah,
But yeah. Well, that's another movie that's coming out. It's coming out in March, I think, isn't it?
yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that does.
Yeah.
Like right now, to use your sports analogy, we're in the phase where the coach hasn't quite come up with the replacement for um, that linebacker who's getting kind of long in the tooth. So he's
hmm
going to ride him as much as he can while trying to find the next thing.
Yeah.
So I believe the next few DC movies that we had to look forward to that were really made by the old regime and are being retooled a little bit by the Zaslav regime to try to maximize the profit. Of course, we've
Yeah.
got Ezra Miller and Flashpoint,
Yeah.
which at this point it's like, man, are they even going to bother releasing it at this point? Can they just write it off still? Um, we've got Blue Beetle, which actually has a decent shot at being successful, I think, just because there's no baggage.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually a little curious about that movie. Yeah.
Then we got Shazam 2, which the trailers for that have been really uninspiring, in my opinion.
hmm Yeah. And of course, last but not least, Aquaman 2,
Oh, I forgot about Aquaman 2. That's right.
which the last I heard, who likes to take dumps on beds is still in it.
Yep. Which means there's
So
going to be a lot of people who refuse to see it just on that basis.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And apparently, so like apparently that movie originally, because Batgirl and Flashpoint were supposed to come out before it, they originally had Michael Keaton Batman in it for some
All right.
reason. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Oh, let's bring in Ben Affleck and have him reshoot it. And now people are saying that, Wait, we've been seeing like there are reports of test screenings where Affleck and Batman is nowhere to be seen in Aquaman 2.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. And with one more story, and then we'll get to have a little bit of, or I'll have to get to have a little bit of Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not happening just like
Yes. Sinestro Core War.
Sinestro Core is going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.